Hello DevOps people, how is everyone? We have the hottest day of the year here in Ireland. Weather is brilliant, sky is blue, a little bit of wind to make it as bearable. And I'm sitting here in my little office doing work with a closed window because our neighbors are mowing their lawns. But I'm happy to be back. Sorry for not streaming last Thursday. We had a huge outage in our data center, and that kind of prevented me from doing my live coding. So the data center we are running our hosting infrastructure in had a huge power outage, and for so far unknown reasons, their emergency power supply didn't cover the drop in the main power grid. Apparently, their emergency power supply even got damaged by this dip, and so it hit quite a few of our servers as well. Additionally, of course, parts of their network infrastructure went down, and so we had to scramble and mitigate the impact of this outage. On top of that, some of our servers didn't take it kindly just being switched off. And so we had quite a few bits and pieces we had to pick up afterwards, with failed hard disks, broken database replication, and all these things. So we were quite busy last Thursday and Friday, and even this week we'll have lots of work left, where we have to follow up on things and get everything back into normal state. However, at least I have enough headspace and enough headspace to do my live stream today, and I'm pretty happy to have you on the stream. Welcome, and as always, if you'd like to say hi, if you would like to ask a question, if it looks like I'm talking gibberish, simply send me a message in the chat and I'll be happy to respond. All right, so let's get started. Just a second, this broadcasting software still is confusing me. Okay, this is last week's agenda. I wanted to extend the user permission schema in our hosting dashboard application. Previously, I had added additional relationships that would make things a bit more flexible and more logical. And now, after extending the database schema, I wanted to build the user permission, wanted to build new user permissions upon that, which did not work. That's why this checkbox here is still unchecked. And if you want to see me fail implementing this, I've just recently added the YouTube video of my session from last Tuesday. But I'll close this, and I've already created a new agenda issue for today, which shows that I decided to take a different approach. and I'll show you why. So when I built this application, I didn't have any experience with Ruby on Rails, so I mostly relied on best practices and things I found on the web that seemed to be common usage. So, for example, I decided to use what's it called? Uh, the most used gem for authentication, device. I decided to use device for letting users log in, and I decided to use CanCan, or rather its successor gem CanCanCan for authorization. So authentication, who is the user, is done by device, and authorization, who is allowed to do what, is done by CanCanCan. However, as I found out over my recent sessions here, CanCanCan's approach is a bit magical. And what I mean by this is that all the permissions are defined mostly by passing a hash to CanCanCan, and this hash will determine who has access to which model, who can read, who can update things. And for the most simple of cases, this always works well. It also worked well for me. However, when I started to introduce this new relationship with it, which is a has many through relationship that should determine access, I simply didn't get it to work. There still might be something I'm doing wrong. I don't want to blame the gem authors for anything. However, if I can't get it to work after multiple hours of trying, it looks like CanCanCan and me aren't the best pairing. That's why I've decided to look for something else, for an alternative, and I found a pretty new gem called Action Policy. The author, Palkan, just did a talk at RailsConf, and yeah, it looks pretty well thought out. It's not feature complete, I'd say. However, it seems to be pretty well maintained, and more importantly, or equally importantly, it takes a different approach that I like much better, which is put permissions into code, not into data. And its approach is also pretty clear. So the thing you simply do is, if you have a model called post, you add another class named post policy, and add methods for the different REST verbs you'd like to do, or controller actions, to be more precise. So when a controller's show method is called, the framework will use the show question mark method in the policy to find out if the currently logged in user is allowed to execute show. In this case, obviously everyone is allowed to see this post. Update is differently. So if someone calls update on the controller, um, this method only returns true if the currently logged in user is an admin, or if their user ID is equal to the post's user ID, which makes sense. And in order to integrate this with Rails, all you have to do is call authorize in your controller. And if authorization is denied, it'll throw an exception that you then can catch and, for example, display an error page or something like that. The nice thing is these are plain Ruby classes, and so it's easy to create tests for this. It's easy to understand, and it's pretty flexible because the way I come to a Boolean value in the end can be as complex as I want to. It especially doesn't have the limitations of having to put everything into a kind of hash format, if that makes sense. So what I'd like to do today is commit everything that I'd like to keep from my recent work, throw away a few commits, and then create a new branch and try out action policy. Obviously, I'll have to rely on my existing tests if action policy actually works, and I'll have to take extra care that I don't have any gaps in my tests, because that would mean that I'll instantly have security issues, which you don't want to have in your product's user interface. So I'll definitely take my time of making sure this is watertight. However, let's get started first. Okay, so I have quite a number of commits. For example, the ability file itself, I simply added this to try and get my has many through relationship to work, which didn't work, so I actually can check out the original file and get rid of that change. Then I have a change in the user model where I just added the association, which makes sense. So let's add this change. Then I expect to see the same thing for the website model, because the thing I did previously is connect users and websites directly where they had been connected very indirectly previously. So that's exactly what should make things a bit more straightforward. And I'll add this as well. Let's see. Now we have a change in the new website collaboration model. But that's only the removal of the ID field. I actually made a mistake and created this connecting table without specifying that I don't need a primary key, because the only keys I need are the website ID key and the user ID key. There doesn't need to be any generic primary key, and I've removed that with a migration, and so we'll add these two files to my commit as well. We'll probably have to add the schema file too. Then let's see. I've made changes to my development seed file, which populates my development database with a website and a user and the intermediate website collaboration. Yep, let's keep this. We need that to try things. Let's see if there was an important change to the factory. No, but it's connected to the primary key, so it'll get added as well. And I guess the spec files will be the same story. Yep. And okay, this file actually has a lot of stuff on top. I guess I'll remove that because that was just my unsuccessful try to test the new authorization things. Okay, and I've added a little script file that automates reinitializing the database with my development data, so we should commit this as a separate commit. That's fine. So this is mostly let's make it a bit bigger commit. Don't think this will be a problem. Fix extraneous primary key in website collaboration. Also added development test data, added database nuke and seed script. So we have this, we have the indexes, website collaboration. Yeah, makes sense. Okay, git push. Let's see if my second shell window here already has my SSH key. Let's just do a new git push here. Yep, no passwords, so I'll have to make sure that I work in this shell to not have this annoying password pop up again and again. Nar, hey, how you doing? Welcome to the stream. How's your day? Okay, that's that. Now, how do we play this? I'd like to make a pull request for this branch first, so I won't be able to use it right away, but I guess I can start with basically our production code anyway. So let's check out master, and I'll go to our repository. Let's make an internal issue. Replace CanCanCan with action policy. To do reasoning. this is actually an enhancement, I'd say. I'll assign myself. So this will be issue number 334. Let's pull the changes that have accumulated. Okay. So let's create a new branch with for action policy. Slayer Darth, welcome. How are you doing, buddy? Welcome to the stream. I'm glad to have you back. Let me guess, you've released 2 Ruby gems, a Python package, and you've already started to rewrite your modules in Haskell, haven't you? No, it's not a Circle CI shirt. It's actually a chef shirt. To be precise, it's a InSpec, which is the how would you call it? Basically a testing framework that allows you to check the status of servers. Now I'm not putting this right, am I? So InSpec is a test framework based on RSpec, which you run on a server, and it'll checks the state of the server against a policy file. So you can define things like, okay, on this server I'd like to have Apache running. I'd like to have port 80 open because Apache is running. I'd like to have a file in Etsy somewhere. So InSpec will go ahead and check all these conditions, and it'll give you back a report if the server is compliant to your policy, which fits the topic of GDPR. Oh yeah, we've been busy as well. Because it makes it possible to use InSpec to see if your servers are in compliance to a set of rules that you've previously defined. And that's a great thing. We are still using InSpec only for development testing. So the servers we actually run InSpec in are the test containers, which we use with the test kitchen tool to see if everything is okay. If we run a new cookbook, a chef cookbook, in a test container, InSpec will tell us, yep, everything is according to plan, so your Apache will be running, it'll open port 80 and things like that. It'll actually be very interesting to try and use InSpec on live servers, because that way you can basically prove that your servers are as they are supposed to be. And yeah, I pretty much not only like InSpec, I also like these t-shirts because they are very soft fabric, and yeah, they feel really good. Shout out to the guys and girls at Chef. Thanks for the t-shirt. So, apart from GDPR, you've been working on a couple of Android apps though. Okay, my condolences. Not because I'm an Apple fanboy, which I am, but for Android you'd have to use Java, haven't you? And yeah, I don't think I'll ever touch Java again. And you also had 2 of your pens leak all over your office desk. Yeah, that feels bad, man. But there's always an upside. At least it didn't stain your shirt if you are someone who uses pocket protectors or things like that. Yeah. Keeping the nerd stereotype alive, huh? All right, so let's get to work. Most annoying things is Google forces their IDE Android Studio. Oh, do they? Okay. I haven't been using IDEs for quite a long time. I would be curious to see how RubyMine actually works because it has a pretty good reputation. Also, in terms of IDEs, Visual Studio seems to really gain traction among developers, which is really surprising me because, yeah, well, I might be still stuck in the past with Microsoft, but I hear a lot of good things about Visual Studio, even among people who use Macs and things like that. Yeah, but it's like Apple, I guess. I don't think you would be able to do proper uh, coding for Apple platforms without using Xcode. I never tried myself, but I guess you're, yeah, it's basically the same situation on the Apple side as well. Action policy. Yeah, so let's get back to my editor window here. Let's start by simply taking a look at how things are wired with CanCanCan at the moment. So let's take a look at the application controller first. So here we have our exception handling for things that aren't allowed. Okay, that's pretty simple here. Let's take a look at a sample controller. Let's say the website's controller. So we already use the authorize method here. And it's the same syntax as action policy, right? No, not quite. I just use authorize here, and action policy will actually detect that I'm in the update controller method. So I don't have to say authorize for reading or writing in this case, which is redundant. Yeah, I can see that. Okay, so we'll have to make quite a few changes here. That's what I wanted to know, because that means I can actually throw out CanCanCan of here in my gem file and add action policy. In version 013. And since I'm keeping my gem list sorted alphabetically, it gets to the top. Action policy 013. Let's run bundle install. You did have another what the fuck Mr. Gates moment. I guess it's more Mr. Nadella now, isn't it? Okay. Okay, now I have to translate my ability file into classes. So I guess I'll introduce a new directory here. App policies. Windows doesn't read your host file if it doesn't use Windows style line endings. Yeah, okay. I can see why. In terms of consistency, however, yeah, that single character turn shouldn't be a problem, should it? Okay. Sorry, just let me try and open the window because I'm starting to feel like I'm in a sauna. I hope that no lawnmowers. Okay. That's a problem with having a proper microphone. It'll pick up everything, even though I won't be able to hear it through my headphones. Okay. Let's start with the application policy. And we could already take care of this part here. So admin users can everything. Okay, let's take a look at the documentation, because there should be a way to give this broad permission. Writing policies. Aliases. Okay. Looks like this is a bit more complex to write, but I still don't mind. So how would this look like? We have this class. Oh, here we go. So we simply define a default rule called manage, and then we use manage, and you can say user. What's the admin method here? User.admin question mark. And that's that. So this should provide full access to admin users. And I'll actually remove these entries bit after bit. So in the end, the ability file should be empty, and I should have all the policies that I need. You have a Windows system subsystem for Linux container running Ubuntu that you use for running your LAMP stack. I see. Yeah, makes sense. You write the host file. Yeah. Yeah, so if you're writing the file from 2 different operating systems, you really need to take care of the line endings then. Yeah, that's actually a WTF moment. You just write a file and suddenly things stop working. Even though the file is syntactically correct. For Android, it's not so bad learning from Android apps on GitHub. We'll only read the docs if I need information on specific APIs. Yeah, I guess I'm taking a pretty similar approach, because especially if you find code that has a very similar use case than the thing you are trying to build, it's a good thing to take a look at how other people have built it, and if it does make sense, if it doesn't seem too convoluted or suspicious, I guess it's pretty common to just copy stuff. And you have a Samsung S6 with Android 7.0, and you can use that as your test platform. Yeah, makes sense. So here we go. We need a user policy. Class user policy derived from application policy. And the current user can read a user and update a user if it's the user itself. It makes sense. So we'll just do the same here. We'll say we have a manage default rule. Maybe we should add a def here. And the current user ID would need to be equal to what exactly? The records user ID. Oh, the records ID. So record is the abstract object that gets passed in for the currently used class, and so we can simply say if user ID equals record ID. It's basically the same. It might even be the same object, not sure, but pretty similar at least. Another approach would be to build an Android app using one of those hybrid app frameworks. Yeah, I guess if I ever get to develop something for smartphones or some smart device, I'd probably use that approach. Use something like React Native. There's also a Ruby-based thingy that you can use for that. But that's not something I've looked into so far. Okay, we can close the application policy as well. Let's close the controllers for the time being, and let's just go ahead and translate this. So then we go to company. So far this feels good. Plus company policy. And this time we should use the controller verbs, I guess. So let's start with create. And create is open for everyone. Okay, so let's simply say true. Then we have a show, which is allowed if the user's company ID equals the record's ID. So user ID equals record. No, user's company ID equals the record's ID. I like that this is a bit more explicit. Quite a bit more explicit than CanCanCan. And the same goes for updating. Which means, I guess, update. I'll have to read up on these verbs. Let me see. So later we'll simply call authorize. Or we don't even have to call authorized, right? We can use this controller hook verify authorized, and then things will happen more or less automatically, or if we don't have a resource, we call authorize explicitly. In that case, action policy tries to infer the resource class from the controller name. Okay, that's okay, that makes sense. And I assume if we call it from the index method in the controller, oh, there's a bug here in documentation. That shouldn't be derived from application policy, but from application controller. I guess if we call it from the index method, it'll also use the index question mark method in the policy. Do not have to do anything except writing policy files and adding authorize calls. Or simply verify authorized. Oh no, I still need to call authorized, but verify authorized will prevent me from forgetting that. fair enough. So apart from update, I'll also need an edit method. But instead of duplicating this, which is just calling for problems, we can use aliases and say edit and destroy, and I guess update as well, should be aliased to update. So I think that I should use edit, update and destroy and alias that to update. And that way we should be good. Then we have the cluster permissions. I just remembered I forgot something, but let me finish this first. Def cluster. No, it's class. Class, cluster, policy. Before I do this, let's make sure we do what is mentioned here. Alias rule is available only if you inherit from action policy base or include action policy aliases in your application policy, which we should do. Oh, we already derived from action policy base, so we're good. Okay. That's fine. So, cluster. Basically, if the cluster's company ID is equal to the user's company ID, we can basically call manage. And I'm not sure if I need to redefine manage here. I don't think so, actually. So if user company ID equals record company ID, yep. And finally, we'll have the website policy. Which should also cover its sub-associations, but I'm not sure if there's a way to do this easily. So let's simply start with the website policy itself. basic stuff is if the website's clusters, company ID equals the user company ID. So it's all pretty simple in our permission scheme here, but that's also the limitation I'd like to get rid of, because everything is connected basically to the company, and that's not enough. Coladia, hey, welcome to the stream. How you doing? Hey, can I get your opinion on something? It's about which one would be best practice when coding. Of course, I'll be happy to share what I think about it. If I do have three statements and have an if inside another if with no else on them, should I be using the and or instead of having if inside if? I see. Okay, let me think. So you're basically checking if condition A, then check condition B with another if, and statement 3, and then do something. So if there is no else, the nested block will only be executed if all three statements are true. And so it would be clearer if you just connect them with an AND. Yeah, I used exactly the latter syntax. If statement 1 and statement 2 and statement 3. Because that conveys the meaning precisely. It can't be more precise than that. And even if there is a possibility that there might be an else in the future, which would make your statement more complex, I wouldn't build my code in anticipation of this possibility. You can always split it apart again into an if and an else, or two nested ifs or something like that. But for the time being, if that's your logic, you have three conditions and they all need to be met. Simply connect them with AND operators. I see many programmers do have if nested inside another if with no else statements. I get confused sometimes, so I wondered if that's what was best practice to do. No, I don't think it is. No, I really don't think it is. It really doesn't make sense from a readability and code cleanliness perspective, because as someone who reads this code, you read the first if and need to store that on your internal stack. Okay, now we have condition A met, and what happens now? Okay, there's another if, and I get two more conditions that also need to be met to be in the inside nested block. And now you have to make the leap yourself. Well, that means that all three conditions need to be met. Why don't they say so in the first place? Code like this often comes to be over time. For example, there might have been an else branch before, and for some reason that got taken away, and now we are left with two nested ifs. But that's exactly why refactoring has become so important in, yeah, well, not even recent years, more like recent decades, because that's the missing cleanup step, to see, okay, now that we've removed the else branch, we can simplify this to a simple single if statement with three Boolean values connected with an AND. And that should have been done at this point, but yeah, many people just don't go this extra step. However, this will come back and cost you, because even if it's just yourself, just let 6 months go by and you read that code again, you'll have to make this extra computation. And even worse, if it's someone else who needs to read the code or needs to maintain the code. Yeah, so yeah. Exactly. Sometimes code really shrinks down if you make an effort of doing this refactoring and making things clearer and more easy to read and understand. There's a great book which is called Clean Code, and I love this book, so I will give you a link. Clean Code, Robert Martin. Here we go. It's Uncle Bob. And yeah, so it's called Clean Code, a handbook of agile software craftsmanship. And I can really recommend it because he goes through all these things and shows examples of how things sometimes are and how to do them in a better way. So I'll just post the link to the chat. Okay, back to my website policy. So if the website's cluster's company ID is equal to the user's company ID, okay. Record cluster company ID. Whoops. User ID. Having these two dots here is a violation of the lore of Demeter, because I'm building this on internal knowledge not only of the record in this context, which is website, but I also know that I not only know that website has a cluster, then I also know that cluster has a company ID, and this two-step inference is frowned upon. I should rather have something like a method in website that gives me the company ID directly, but since I don't want to get too deep into things, I leave that to a later refactoring. PowerShell, yeah, I keep hearing good things about it. I've never worked with PowerShell, so my experience with Windows scripting goes back to the olden times when you had to write .bat files, and that wasn't fun. But this is another thing I've just mentioned earlier, that I'm surprised that Visual Studio has a pretty good reputation. PowerShell does as well. Okay, here we go. So that's the main thing, I guess. And the other models that are associated with website just go deeper. But I guess, do we even have controllers for these? Yeah, we do, don't we? Let me see. So there are databases controllers, aux domains controllers, SSH keys controller. Well, we need policies for these as well, I guess. You can just import a list of usernames and make all the accounts on Active Directory with it. You can hash strings and verify and scroll internet with port. Yeah, it's pretty flexible, I hear. And of course, it makes dealing with Active Directory easier. You've never really done Ruby, but it looks a little bit like JavaScript. Yeah, well, yeah, a little bit at least. They are both pretty object-oriented, and so in that sense, they are really similar. But I don't have enough JavaScript experience to compare them side by side. Okay, so let's be a bit more productive here, and let's go to aux domain. Policy aux domain policy. Class aux domain policy. The user's ID needs to be equal to the records website clusters company ID, not quite, the user's company ID. So this is even a worse violation of the law of Demeter, because now not only do I have internal knowledge of my aux domain, I know that it has a website which does in turn have a cluster, which does in turn have a company ID, and that makes maintenance of these things very hard, because if I change cluster, say I remove the company ID method and replace it with something else, not only does website have to change, but also aux domain, and so the chain goes on and on. That's not a good idea. But let's not try and fix the world in a single step. It's the same deal with database. Actually, I will just copy this. Database policy, and I can use the exact same code because record now stands for database, and databases also have a website. Or do they? Better take a look at that. Database policy. Yeah, it does. It belongs to website, so I can use the website method here. So you wrote a user guide for a project manager from an agency. Set up one of your projects locally on Windows, and oh yeah, I can relate. As a company that provides documentation to their customers, I can relate. I won't get into details, but yeah, I can relate. Have you ever had happen that you coded software and after time you get contacted because someone has hacked inside the software and you must fix it? No, but only because neither I nor even my company do software development for outside customers. The only software we develop is this software I'm working on, which is our customer dashboard. And fortunately, we never have been contacted with about the fact that it had been hacked. And I hope that's actually not because someone found it out and didn't notify us. No, I won't name and shame. I actually don't think I would know names from the top of my head, but yeah, there are people that basically take the same approach as you mentioned before. I won't read documentation before I really need to, and that makes things only harder for us. Okay, so database is done, and now we go to SSH key. Actually, database should only have read and create abilities. Okay, I'll return to this later, so let me just create a new thing about SSH keys. SSH key policy. Ah, crap. So copy this. In this case, an SSH key belongs to our website, doesn't it? Yes, it does. Here we go. Belongs to a website, so I can use the same method calls here as well. But the database does just need to be created and then only read. Customers should not be able to delete databases again, I guess. That's... yeah, they only have read access, so I'll use create here. Or do we use an alias rule? I guess I'll settle for duplication here. Or I could do it properly, create a private method. Owns its website. That's that. Do you think Caladia is looking to hack us? Very suspicious. We learned from school that when you provide documentation, it must be written so that someone with equal skill level is able to follow steps. Having a hard time not to comment on this. Oh dear. What's that saying? If you make your product idiot proof, it'll be used by idiots. just went on my School of IT Security and Penetration Testing. Oh, nice, interesting, interesting. Yeah, OPSEC is a very interesting area at the moment. Okay. Maybe I shouldn't do software security coding in public, should I? However, yeah, I'm pretty happy that I have a pretty solid test suite that I'll be able to run in the end and see if things will break. So that's the SSH key done. This function can go. This can go. So basically, ability itself can go. We haven't even added the CanCanCan gem anymore. So I simply go ahead and remove it. So we have removed the ability file and added quite a number of policy files. And I've added the gem file. Okay, let's do a commit. Do you use cookies in the code? No, not exactly. So actually I'm relying on a pretty popular gem for authentication that manages all that stuff with user sessions and things like that. And since it's very popular, it's pretty reliable. And I don't have to deal with cookies and things like that myself. I really don't want to. Okay, replace can with action policy. How do I write it? It's actually action underscore policy. No, it's action policy. Okay. Okay, I won't spend time on my reasoning here. I can do that in the pull request. I guess now it's time to take a look at the controllers, but I just took a look at the clock and I see I've only have a quarter of an hour left. And to be honest, the weather is great outside and it's pretty hot in here in this small office in my home here. So I guess I leave my work on the controllers either for tomorrow or offline or for Thursday for my second stream this week. What do you think? Call it a day? Go out? Get some ice cream? Thought so. Okay, no, I'll actually spend the rest of the time on stream, but just not working, so I'll leave it open to you if there's something you'd like to chat about. Let's at least take a few looks at things. I really don't want to do any more coding today, but let's see where CanCanCan is still wired. It's here. So I need to basically do... Now I'm coding again. Let's simply rescue from action policy unauthorized. And then I'll get a reasons object with which has messages. So something like this. Alert exception. Reason messages, right? No, reasons messages. Okay. Other than that, there is no authorization in here. Okay. So, Claudia, what exactly are you doing in school? Obviously, it is IT, but is it focused on IT security, or is that just uh, one of the topics? So let's see, clusters controller. That's one of the main controllers here, and we do load an authorized resource. Is that from device or from CanCan? Looks like it's just CanCan. Let me see. IT security. Okay. Oh, and it's one of these studies where it's part school and part work in an actual business. That's a great thing. I like that a lot. This apprenticeship approach. Management of Windows servers, virtualization, cloud, Python laws, GDPR, and penetration testing. Okay, you had CTF in penetration testing, so it's capture the flag. So it was a penetration testing competition, something like that. Many companies in Sweden don't want to take in juniors. That's their loss, I'd say, because both from a productivity standpoint and from a company culture standpoint, it's oftentimes much easier to hire juniors that will grow into the company and with the company than to have seniors who are used to a specific way of doing things, and so yeah, I always liked the approach of having people joining a company that just have finished school or are even still in school. HR, yeah, will always look for people with 10 years of experience and some masters that they can point to in their CV. Yeah, that makes things easier, doesn't it? But I wonder if the people who actually hire these people, so the IT managers, agree to this approach. Simply going the way, okay, let's weed out who doesn't have a lot of experience and doesn't have a master's in computer science, which is total bogus. I have studied computer science, and I've been working in companies as a manager, and I've been running my own IT companies. My current IT company has been running for 8 years now, and I don't think a background in computer science is necessary to do the stuff we do, even though it's really high quality and high demand stuff. In demand in terms of skills, and so our ops team really needs to deliver a lot of highly sophisticated technology, and most of the people in our ops team don't have a degree in computer science. So, is this load and authorize resource? Yeah, that's CanCanCan. So I simply need to replace that with the equivalent of action policy. No, I don't have to. I need to just call authorize, and I do have to call that everywhere. I would expect that this is easier than having to call authorize everywhere. Not sure. Having it this explicit might make sense and might be an advantage, but it's a lot of duplication. I guess I'll see. My brain is melting. Okay, I leave that for next time. So far, so good. Let's push. And that's that. Okay, folks, that's enough for today. I felt pretty productive, and I think action policy feels better than CanCanCan, but I'll only see when I get to incorporating my newest changes with this new website collaborations model. And until then, I'll have to first check if I can actually replace CanCanCan completely with action policy, which means my tests need to keep working. And if you're curious to see if they are, well, let's meet again on Thursday. Same time, 3:30 p.m. Ireland time, British time, GMT. And we'll see how things work. For today, thanks for joining me here. Thanks for the great chat. when you code policy, let me get to your question. When you code policy, are you coding like a policy that you can import to Windows servers and manage? No, it's just the application's own policy of allowing users to do certain things within the application. So it's an authorization framework that I'm using, and I'm replacing one framework with another. And I'm looking forward to Thursday to see if I'm actually able to do this replacement. Until then, take care, thanks, and cheers.